Welcome back to the garage. This is Token Teardown, the show where we jack crypto projects up on the lift, look underneath the hood, and tell you what is actually holding the thing together. No hype, no vibes, no trust me, bro. Today on the lift is Nervos Network, ticker CKB. Now, yes, we will talk price later. Yes, we will talk upside. And to understand Nervos, you have to picture it the right way. Is Nervos were a car? It would be a Ram 2500 with a Cummins diesel. Not a supercar, not a showpiece, not something built to flex. This is a work truck. The kind of truck you buy because you need it to start every morning, pull real weight, and keep running long after the shiny stuff is parked on the side of the road. Nobody brags about a Cummins. They rely on it. It is not fast off the line. It is not quiet. It does not care if you like it. It just works. That is Nervos. This is not a chain built to win drag races. This is a chain built to haul infrastructure day after day, cycle after cycle. Now, before we go any further, I need to be clear about one thing. This is a team effort. None of these teardowns happen because I skim a thread and wing it. XXX Christian is buried in the research white papers, GitHub commits, token distribution, incentive design, stress testing assumptions, until the story either holds up or falls apart. That discipline is why this garage has credibility. But before we touch numbers, we have to answer the only question that matters. Does Nervos deserve a place in your garage as a machine you rely on? Or is this just another over-engineered build that never actually gets put to work because price without fundamentals is just revving the engine in neutral? All right, before we talk speed, usage, or charts, we need to talk about who built this thing. Before we talk about what this machine does, how clever it is, or whether it belongs anywhere near your wallet, we need to talk about who built it. Because in this garage, we do not trust claims. We trust the people holding the tools. Nervos did not come out of a hype Discord. It did not come from anonymous avatars, and it did not launch with a bull market countdown clock. This thing was built by protocol engineers. At the center is Jan Shea, a former Ethereum core researcher, not a dApp builder, not a growth hacker, a base layer engineer. That matters. People who work on base layers do not think in weeks. They think in failure modes, edge cases, and 10-year consequences. Jan spent years inside Ethereum's research world and then stepped away to build something different. Not because Ethereum is broken, but because he could already see where it would strain under scale. Alongside him is Kevin Wang, focused on incentives and token economics, not yield farming, not marketing narratives, the boring math. That decides whether a system survives when attention disappears. And Daniel V, coming from exchanges and wallets, Yunbi and I'm Token, meaning he understands what actually breaks when real users move real money. That combination matters. You have a protocol architect, an economic systems designer, and an operator who has seen financial infrastructure fail. This is not a meme team. This is not a hype team. This is infrastructure people. And here is the strongest signal of all. They did not keep changing the mission. No panic pivots, no rebrands every cycle. No, we are an AI chain now phase. They kept building the same system through bull markets and bear markets, assuming correctly that time is the real audit. So the pit crew takeaway is simple. Nervos was not built by tourists. It was built by people who expected the road to be long and built the machine accordingly. And now that we know who built it, the next question is obvious. What did they actually choose to build? Normal account model. Most chains use, instead, it uses a cell model rather than one giant shared balance sheet. Assets live in individual containers called cells, each with its own rules, its own lock, and its own logic. For engineers, that means explicit state and parallel processing. For everyone else, it means everyone has their own lockbox and nobody dumps screws into your drawer. Now let's talk execution, because this is where people get confused. Nervos intentionally does not push heavy execution onto layer 1. That is not a limitation, that is restraint. Execution lives on layer 2 rollups, sidechains, execution environments. That is where speed happens. That is where apps live. That is where chaos belongs. The base layer just keeps score. Instead of one overworked engine doing everything, Nervos splits responsibilities cleanly. Below security, ownership, final settlement, above speed experimentation and user activity. And here is another deliberate choice. Nervos runs programs on CKB VM based on RISC-V, plain English smart contracts behave like real programs. You write the code, you compile it, it runs deterministically. Most chains force developers into one weird custom language forever. Nervos says, if it runs safely in the engine, bring it. That is not about being flashy. That is about not painting yourself into a corner. So when you zoom out, Nervos is not asking how fast can we go right now. It is asking how do we stay correct when everything else is moving fast. Which brings us to the next question we cannot dodge. If this thing is built like serious infrastructure, who is actually using it today? All right. Now we stop talking theory and start talking reality. Because great architecture with no users is just a beautiful truck sitting on jack stands. So is anyone actually using Nervos today? The honest answer is yes, but not the way Twitter likes. Nervos is not a retail playground chain. You are not seeing millions of daily users clicking buttons. You are not seeing meme volume. You are not seeing influencer screenshots of daily P&L. And that is not a failure. That is a design consequence. Nervos today is being used primarily as base layer infrastructure, which means usage shows up differently. You see it in assets being issued and stored. You see it in developers building layer 2 execution environments. You see it in cross-chain tooling and Bitcoin-adjacent experimentation. This is the part of the highway before the billboards go up. There are real systems live. Layer 2 environments exist. EVM-style applications can run. Assets move across bridges. Contracts get deployed and upgraded. This is not a chain built to farm dopamine. There is no illusion of massive activity. No wash volume theater. No, everyone is using it. Narrative built on incentives. That is the upside. The downside is obvious. Adoption is still early. Nervos has not had its breakout moment yet, and infrastructure does not get a free pass forever. Eventually, usage has to show up. This is the classic infrastructure trade. You do not build bridges because traffic is heavy today. You build bridges because traffic is coming. The Nervos bet is not look how busy it is right now. The Nervos bet is when execution layers mature, when cross-chain demand grows, when Bitcoin-based systems need more flexibility. This base layer is already here. If you only value loud on-chain activity, this will feel underwhelming. If you understand how real infrastructure adoption works, slow, quiet, then sudden. All right, now we slow this down, because this is the part where Nervos either makes sense or you finally understand why it was built the way it was. Let's start with the foundation. Nervos is a proof of work layer 1. Yes, proof of work, like Bitcoin. That choice alone tells you the philosophy. This chain was built to be hard to capture, hard to shut down, and hard to bully. No validators voting each other off the island. No slashing games. No political fights over stake. Just computation securing the network. But Nervos didn't just copy Bitcoin and call it innovation. They kept the reliability and upgraded the engine. Now let's talk about how blocks get made. Bitcoin is a freight train. Slow, heavy, almost impossible to stop. Nervos is also a freight train, but with better scheduling. Bitcoin waits a long time between blocks. Very safe, very slow. Nervos uses an upgraded form of Nakamoto consensus. Plain English. Blocks come faster without throwing away the security model. Bitcoin is a diesel engine, locked at 1 RPM. Nervos is the same engine with better timing and fuel injection. Still not a race car, still built for reliability, just smoother operation. Now let's talk about how data is stored, because this is where most chains choke. Most blockchains use one big shared balance sheet. Everyone touching the same state all the time. That's why congestion spreads everywhere. Nervos does not work like that. Nervos uses a cell model. Think of cells like individual parts bins. Each bin holds its own asset or data. Each bin has its own rules. Each bin is locked with a key. You don't open every bin just to grab one bolt. Coder translation, explicit state, parallel processing, fewer side effects. Car translation, everyone has their own toolbox and nobody dubs screws into your drawer. That design choice matters at scale. Now let's talk about how code actually runs. Most chains force developers into one weird custom language. You either like it or you're stuck with it forever. Nervos did something different. Nervos built CKB VM. It's based on RISC-V, a real CPU instruction set. Plain English, smart contracts behave like real programs. You write the code, you compile it, it runs deterministically. Car metaphor. Most chains sell you a sealed engine. Nervos gives you an engine bay with clear specs. As long as the engine fits and runs safely, you're allowed to bolt it in. That's not about speed. That's about not painting yourself into a corner. Now here's the most misunderstood part. Nervos does not try to be fast at layer 1. That is intentional. Layer 1 is for security, ownership, final settlement. Speed lives on layer 2. Roll-ups, sidechains, execution environments. That's where trading happens. That's where apps live. That's where chaos belongs. The base layer stays boring. Car analogy. You don't race inside City Hall, and you don't store legal records on the highway. Nervos separates those jobs cleanly. Below steel frame, title registry. Crash protection. Above speed, customization, experimentation. This is restraint, not weakness. Now let's talk about bridges and interop, because this is where power meets risk. Nervos connects to other systems, layer 2 environments, and Bitcoin-adjacent execution paths. This is powerful, and this is also where crypto usually breaks. In this space, bridges are like tow hitches. They're necessary, they're useful, and if they're built wrong, they snap. That risk exists everywhere. The key point, the base layer can be rock solid, and the system can still leak at the connectors. That's something you always watch. And now that you understand the tech, we need to talk about the fuel system. All right, now we talk tokenomics. And don't let that word scare you. Tokenomics is just a fancy way of saying how the fuel moves through the engine. That's it. Who gets paid when they get paid, and what happens when the tank starts to fill or run dry. Because you can have the best engine in the world, and if the fuel system is wrong, the whole thing eventually stalls. CKB does not work like most tokens. There is no fairy tale about fixed supply saving the day. And that scares people until you understand why they did it this way. Nervos uses 2 fuel lines. One gets the engine started, the other keeps it running long term. The first is primary issuance. This pays the miners, the people securing the network. Think of this like the factory warranty period. Early on, you need strong incentives to get machines plugged in and the lights turned on. That issuance steps down over time, gradual, predictable, like easing off break-in oil once the engine is seated. Secondary issuance. This is not about growth. This is about maintenance. Blockchains have a problem most people ignore. State grows forever. Every account, every contract, every asset. Someone has to store it, verify it, and keep it available. Most chains pretend that cost doesn't exist. Nervos priced it in from day one. Secondary issuance is state rent. Plain English. If you take up space on the base layer, you pay for that privilege over time. Car version. If you store parts in the warehouse, you pay rent. If you just own the building, you don't. Now here's the part people miss. Secondary issuance is split. Some goes to miners because storing more state costs real resources. Some goes to the Nervos DAO. The DAO exists so long-term holders are not silently diluted. If you lock your CKB in the DAO, you receive issuance that offsets inflation. Grandma version. If the town raises property taxes but you own the building, you get a rebate. You're punished for clogging the warehouse. That's the alignment. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. If Nervos never gets meaningful usage, secondary issuance feels like drag. It feels like inflation because demand never shows up. But if usage does arrive, if more assets, more contracts, more systems need base layer settlement, CKB becomes base layer real estate. People need it to store ownership, to reserve space, to anchor systems, and that demand absorbs issuance. This is not moon math. This is systems math. Car metaphor. This fuel system is not nitrous. It's a regulated fuel pump designed to keep the engine running even when the crowd leaves the track. So here's the takeaway. CKB is not designed to pump on hype. It's designed to function under pressure. It rewards patience, it rewards understanding, and it rewards usage. But it punishes dead weight and abuse of the base layer. If you're looking for fireworks, this will disappoint you. If you're looking for something built to survive decades, this starts to make sense. And now that we understand the tech and the fuel system, all right, now we zoom out. Because tech without narrative doesn't travel, and infrastructure without community doesn't survive. So let's talk about the story around Nervos network. Who's talking about it, what direction it's moving, and whether the road ahead actually makes sense. First, the narrative. Nervos has never been a hype chain. It has never been marketed as the fastest, the cheapest, or the loudest, and that was intentional. The narrative Nervos has leaned into is base layer infrastructure. Not the casino, not the playground, the foundation. More recently, that narrative tightened. Instead of trying to be everything, Nervos has increasingly positioned itself as a Bitcoin-adjacent infrastructure layer, not replacing Bitcoin, not competing with it, but extending what Bitcoin can do. That's why you've seen work around Bitcoin-style assets, UTXO-based design, and experiments that let Bitcoin value interact with richer execution environments. Plain English, Bitcoin is the gold vault. Nervos is trying to be the steel-reinforced floor underneath it. That narrative matters, because when markets rotate back toward Bitcoin infrastructure that complements Bitcoin gets attention. Not overnight, but steadily. Now let's talk community. Nervos does not have a loud retail army. You won't see thousands of meme accounts. You won't see hype brigades on every post. What you do see, builders, engineers, long-term holders, people who actually read specs. The community is smaller, but it's technically serious. That's a double-edged sword. On one hand, less noise, less fake activity. On the other, less organic amplification. This is not a chain that trends because it shouts. It spreads because someone smart says, hey, this is actually well designed. Now let's talk roadmap, because this is where Nervos quietly earns respect. There has been no chaos roadmap, no wild pivots. The focus has stayed consistent, strengthening the base layer, improving layer 2 execution, and tightening Bitcoin integration. Major upgrades have already happened. The chain is live, stable, and running. This is not a perpetual testnet project. Layer 2 frameworks exist, execution environments are live, bridges and tooling are functional. Upcoming focus is not flashy, it's refinement. Better developer tooling, better interoperability, better governance. And speaking of governance, Nervos has been transitioning toward more formal governance, with DAO structures meant to give long-term holders a voice. Not overnight, not recklessly, slow, controlled, deliberate, which fits the entire philosophy. Now, let's talk speed, because people always ask that. How fast is it? And here's the honest answer. Nervos Layer 1 is not built to win speed contests. It is not trying to push insane transaction numbers. It is not built for high-frequency trading. Base layer speed is conservative, predictable, and sufficient for settlement. Car analogy, this is not a drag strip. It's the title office. Speed lives on Layer 2. That's where execution environments, roll-ups, and application logic run. So when someone asks how fast is Nervos, the correct answer is as fast as it needs to be at the base, and as fast as Layer 2 makes it at the edge. That separation is intentional. Trying to make Layer 1 fast and final and decentralized is how chains break. Nervos chose restraint, Now here's the big picture takeaway. Nervos is not chasing the current cycle. It is positioning for the cycle after the cycle. When infrastructure matters again, when Bitcoin dominance rises, when people care about security and settlement, that doesn't mean it wins, but it means it survives. And in crypto, survival is step one. Now that we've covered the tech, the fuel system, the narrative, the community, the roadmap, and the speed reality. All right, now we talk about the uncomfortable part, competition and failure. Because no matter how clean the build is, nothing exists in isolation. Nervos competes in a very crowded lane. It competes with Ethereum layer 2s, with modular blockchains, and with Bitcoin layer 2 narratives. That's a packed highway. Ethereum already has users. Solana already has speed. Bitcoin already has trust. So Nervos is not trying to beat them by being louder, faster, or trendier. Nervos is competing on structure. Its bet is that most chains overloaded themselves too much. Execution, too much complexity, too much state, all living in one place. Nervos chose separation, security, and ownership at the base, speed and experimentation at the edge. If that architectural bet is right, Nervos looks early. If it's wrong, Nervos looks unnecessary. That's the risk. Now let's talk about where this can actually fail. The biggest risk is simple. Adoption never arrives. Infrastructure only wins if people eventually build on it. If developers keep choosing Ethereum rollups, if Bitcoin integrations stay experimental, if layer 2 usage never meaningfully grows, then Nervos becomes very well engineered and very quiet. Another risk is complexity. This is not the easiest chain to understand. And in crypto, laziness is a powerful force. If developers don't want to think, they go where thinking is optional. There is also bridge risk. Every chain that connects outward inherits risk at the connectors. The base layer can be perfect, and the system can still leak at the edges. And finally, there is the patience risk. This is not a fast gratification project. If you need constant hype, constant confirmation, or constant price action, this will test you. Nervos assumes most people will leave early, and it is built to survive that. Now that we've said all of that, we can let Lulu run the numbers. Now we're at everyone's favorite part, the Moo Law. Before we touch numbers, credit where it's due. Lulu is the head of TA in this garage. She doesn't guess, she doesn't hope, and she definitely doesn't care how badly you want something to go up. She runs the charts, the models, and the scenarios. When numbers show up here, they came through Lulu first. That's the rule. Now let's paint the picture. Right now, the total crypto market is about $3.2 trillion. That's the pasture we're standing in today. Inside that pasture, Nervos Network, ticker CKB, sits at roughly $128 million in market cap. That's not broken. That's exactly where a quiet infrastructure project lives in a $3 trillion market. At that scale, CKB trades at about 0.2 of a cent. That's not small because it's weak. It's small because the field is still small. So, this is not about predicting tomorrow. It's about asking one question. What happens if the field gets bigger? Same cows, same fences, same rules, just more land. Scenario 1, cruise control. Crypto grows. Nervos keeps the same dominance. No narrative shift. No sudden love. The pasture expands, and Nervos walks forward with it. In this case, CKB goes up because everything goes up. No outperformance, no headlines. You didn't buy brilliance. You bought exposure. It works, it pays, but nobody calls you a genius. Scenario 2, grabs a small pie of the increase. This is the quiet winner. Infrastructure starts to matter again. Bitcoin dominance rises. People care about settlement and security. Nervos doesn't take over. It just becomes relevant. A few systems anchor to it. Some developers choose it. Some capital parks there. Market share ticks up slightly, and that's all it needs. This is where numbers stretch slowly and cleanly. The wait, why is this holding up moment. Scenario 3, it catches on. This is the real upside case. Too many chains break themselves with too much execution. too much chaos, too much state. Infrastructure gets re-rated. Nervos becomes a trusted base layer. Not famous, not loud, but relied on. This is where you stop explaining why you own it and start answering, how did you see that early? Not overnight, not vertical. Compound recognition. And then there's the one nobody models, the black swan. A regulatory shift, a major chain failure, a security event, or a sudden return to proof of work trust. Something breaks the current assumptions. Suddenly, security, settlement, and neutrality become first-order concerns. Infrastructure that survived quietly gets repriced violently. You don't buy black swans. You position for them. That's why boring things exist in exciting markets. Now, before you start aping into this project, we need to be very clear. None of this is financial advice. Not today, not ever. This is education. This is analysis. This is how we think about machines, nothing more. And there is one more thing, especially if you are new here. The head of TA in this garage, the one who runs the charts, the one who runs the models, the one who runs the scenarios is Lulu. And yes, Lulu is a pigtail snoot, hoofs, the whole thing. So if you decide to take financial advice from livestock, that is completely on you. All right, now let's run the dyno and bring this back to today. Right now, the chart is not screaming and it is not dead. Momentum exists, but it is controlled. This is not a breakout chart. This is a base build. Support is holding, resistance is overhead. If it breaks, it will need narrative fuel. If it does not, it continues to grind. This is not a trader's toy. This is a positioning asset. You are not front-running hype. You are waiting for confirmation. That is the dyno. Reading no drama, no promises, just what the machine is doing right now. So here is the honest close. Nervos network ticker, CKB, is not built to win a season. It is built to survive cycles. It is conservative, deliberate, and intentionally boring at the base layer. That frustrates people, and that filters people. If you're chasing speed, there are better options. If you're chasing attention, there are louder projects. But if you're looking for something designed to still be here when narratives change and noise fades, Nervos earns respect. Not blind trust, not blind conviction, respect. If you want a project put on the lift, drop it in the comments. We read them all. Share this with your fellow crypto bros, especially the one who thinks infrastructure doesn't matter. And if you want to poke around, check out the website gurucryptogarage.guru. It is free. Play around in it and tell us what you think. In this garage, we don't chase noise. We inspect machines.